understand because I thought everybody was allowed. Yeah, I'm curious.
Okay, now we see how it rolls. Okay, I've got like about 30 seconds left before it's order. Darla, before we get started, can I ask you to hold your camera still? Thank you. Oh, sure. Okay. Here we go. Everybody here? Okay, it's 1 o'clock and I'm going to call today's meeting to order. First, I'd like to point out that Councillor Alderson, Councillor Fraser, and Councillor are attending via electronic communications. I'll move on to number 2, acknowledgement of Indigenous peoples. The town of Rocky Mountain House wishes to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Blackfoot, Cree, Saulteaux, Stoney, and Métis. Move on to number 3. We have an agenda in front of us, and I'll ask now if there's any additions to the agenda. Councillor Fraser, any additions to the agenda?
No.
Councillor Alderson or Councillor All, any additions?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Rouse?
Yeah, the worship. So in closed session, the 15.2 advice officials.
Okay.
Speaking with the government relations now.
Get that? No? Okay. So we're adding, we're changing 15.2 to advice from officials. And we're moving intergovernmental relations to 15.3. Okay, thank you. All right, just looking for a motion to accept the agenda as amended. Councillor Brown, all in favor of that? That's carried, thank you. We're going to move on to number 4. We have a delegation by Zoom, and it's Ms. Darla Preston, and she is the manager at Evergreen Mobile Home Park. And I will turn it over to you now, Darla.
Hi, can you guys still hear me? Okay, my concern is a trailer in the trailer park. The tenant, the owner who that belonged to, passed away in January. I'm not looking to have ownership of the trailer. My concern is that it is filled with mold and has had questionable people in and out of it for the last year. And so the tenants that are living there, I'm concerned for their safety and health, and yeah.
Okay. You got anything else, or?
Right now it is completely vacant. I have gone in front of the Red Deer Court of Queen's bench to have the tenant that was in it, has been in it for several years, evicted. I have not received rent from them. According to my rent receivables for about 2 years, I have just taken management position at the end of December myself. There is back taxes owed on the property for about 5 years, I believe. I have talked with the lady at the town office, sorry, name's not coming to me right now, about having the town reevaluate the property. They say that it's worth $20,000. I've had a couple people in, there's no value to it. It's completely filled with mold. I think that's about all I have to say about it.
Okay, so you don't own the trailer then, Darla?
I do not own the trailer. I have put in an ad in the paper for anybody who was looking after the estate to get a hold of me. I have presented yesterday the letter of the next of kin and the death certificate of the past owner.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Darla? Councillor Phillips?
So just based on the pictures and everything I see here, are you looking to demolish this trailer? Is that correct?
I would like the trailer to be demolished, yes.
And then, but she doesn't own the trailer, so that can't be demolished, correct?
Yeah, Your Worship, I think we have to do a little more research into the legal aspect of this. Bring a report back to council with possible actions. So I think the request is to waive the taxes so we can get a demolition permit.
So the request is to waive the taxes so that you can get a demolition permit. Is that what you're looking at, Darla?
Yep. Also on that end too, though, I would need to be the owner of the trailer to demolish it, is what I'm understanding. I have spoken with Peter Crosley a couple of times, and he just informs me that I should move forward, that I don't want any ownership of the trailer. In my aspect, I'm looking trying to take care of the other tenants in the trailer park. And the place right now is unfit, and I've had people trying to break in, so it's attracting what's the word I'm looking for? It's attracting
I think I know what you're,
Undesirable.
yeah. People that are paying rent. Okay, Councillor Fraser has a question.
Is there a way that we can condemn the building? Because it seems to be the issue is whoever demolishes the building needs to have some sort of ownership. Is there a caveat that if a building is abandoned or condemned because of the state, that it can be listed as condemned so it can be torn down? Is there a legal way to do that?
But we have to determine who owns, we can't do anything to the building because we don't own it.
And Your Worship, it would be Alberta Health Inspector that condemned it.
Okay, so yeah, even if it's condemned, then what,
Well, it's still the same situation between the owner and local park.
right? Okay,
And is it currently just owned by the estate? Is that?
That's what I think we need to look
Determine.
into.
I have no further questions. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thanks very much for your presentation, Darla. We will be discussing this a little bit further on down in the agenda in greater detail.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank
Have a
you.
wonderful day.
So we'll move on to 4.2, our delegation from Rocky Miner Football. Do we have Mr. Lau on the phone or the email or the Zoom?
Your worship might need to send them an email to remind them, however, doesn't appear it's on there.
Nothing, he has not. He did respond last week saying he would zoom in at 1 o'clock. His time was given. Okay. We've had no requests. Okay. Mr. Kraus, should we put this down farther or should we?
You can just table it to your worship. And then if he appears. then
You could be
just bring
having
it back.
technical difficulties.
Sure. So I will table 4.2. And I guess if he doesn't zoom in today, we'll do it for another day. Okay. Email says thanks to you tomorrow. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to number 5 then now. Adoption of the previous minutes. We have meeting minutes in front of us from April the 21st. Everybody's had a chance to read those minutes. Okay, just looking for a motion. Thanks.
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes of the 21st.
Thank you. Everybody hear that? All in favor of that motion? Thank you. We'll move on to 5.2. The draft special council meeting minutes from April the 30th. Everybody's had a chance to read those. Okay. Councilor Fraser?
Sorry. I will make that motion to accept them as presented.
About 30 minutes. Okay. All in favor of that motion? Okay, and that's carried. Thank you. So we'll move on to number 6 then. 6.1, the delegation business from Darla Preston, manager at Evergreen Mobile Park. I think it's pretty clear we need some more information. So I guess just a motion to have admin bring back a report with more information. Pretty good with that? Everybody can hear me? Okay. Councilor Alden, did you have your hand up?
No.
Okay, I'm just looking for a motion.
I'll make
Councilor Alden, okay. Councilor Alderson, first.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, have admin bring a report back with more information.
That's correct.
All in favor of that motion? That's carried, thank you. So we're going to skip over 6.2 then. Number 7, business none. We'll move on to number 8 and 8.1 is the RFD for cancellation of the 2020 Markham Main. And I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Schrader.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is before council in regards to Marketplace on Main for 2020. Just bringing a report to council, talking about AHS rules and regulations in regards to large gatherings during the summer months. We're just following what AHS is proposing in regards to hosting events for large gatherings. They're limiting it to 15 people for large gatherings. Ideally, our Market on Main, of course, attracts a lot more than 15 people on an evening during the summer. So, as far as direction, we're looking for direction. We're proposing to cancel it, of course, just because of AHS rules and regulations. But I do have a recommendation to cancel it. But I'm open for questions.
Councilor Phillips.
Is there a possibility of doing a short version of Market on Main for, if by chance AHS opens things up in July, that we do a shorter version?
Oh, we're just following their numbers, I guess, and I guess, 15 people is, and I know farmers market, they've asked, or they've inquired about them hosting their own, through the summer, even prior to the summer. They usually host it in the brick parking lot. We've recommended possibly using the arena parking lot here, or even the community center as far as, I think they're mandated to one entrance in, one entrance out, so they can control the numbers. I'm not saying you can't do that on Main Street, but it might be difficult in regards to, having 15 people on site with as many entrances as there are. Maybe we just limit it to the north entrance, and that's where people enter and exit. But as of right now, as far as what we know, it's only 15 people per gathering. So whether that's worthwhile,
Okay, Councillor Lorraine?
Just listening to your description, it sounds like a bit of a logistical nightmare. But I don't think that that's even fair to put on staff to try to basically be bouncers at an outdoor marketplace. That to me seems like not unreasonable.
I wonder if we could do it a one-way street. So have, all vendors maybe going all the way down the main street and having them only on one side and having only traffic one way. Or looking at the possibility, I don't know, Red Deer Farmers Market and Old Strathcona Farmers Market are still going ahead. I'm just wondering if we could do some research into how they are doing it, and how are they getting away with it. And really, it's still 8 weeks away. So do we cancel it now, or do we wait a few weeks or a month, or kind of go ahead and plan it? And then with the knowledge that, that we would have to cancel it if something drastic changes. I have Councillor Fraser and then Mr. Shaw.
I know that farmers markets were listed as essential services when they had amended the list. Would we fall under that because is it because it's produce and they need to get rid of the produce? Like, I guess if we even qualify as a farmer's market, or if it has to have a certain number of food vendors. Because I know they were listed as essential services but I don't know whether we would count.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking of looking at Red Deer and Strathcona. Are they strictly only selling food now? Or are they still selling everything that, our market on Main vendors sold as well?
So two things. We're considered a public market, and the farmers market, of course, ties in. So there's two different entities to our market on Main. Ideally, comment regarding Old Strathcona is within a building, so it's easier for people to control going in and out for numbers at Old Strathcona, because it's in a building. So Red Deer Farmers Market's different, of course, but that's why even our local Clearwater Farmers Market's investigating to get approval for their market in May and June, as far as having controls on it.
Okay. Did anybody have, Councillor All, did you have your hand up or?
No.
You have to keep your hands down. Councillor Phillips?
I would like to see us, if we're looking at canceling this, maybe delay that. Just to see if there's a way of salvaging a short version of Market on Main. Maybe we only have it for a month. As opposed to canceling it now. We could have had a short. I would just like to see if we could maybe salvage something out of it.
And that's kind of the way I'm thinking as well. And maybe then even extending the market into like a harvest market or something like that into September.
Weather's usually better.
Yeah, really. And there still are many produce vendors in that time frame. So, did anybody else have anything to add?
I have a few things. With the farmers market, there's a bit of criteria that they have to follow. And things are still unclear with town ground Alberta Health Services on that still to this day. So with saying that, I mean, the criteria, of course, to be apart, and your booths are going to be that much further apart, and the one-way traffic gets, and there's no entertainment with the markets, and with the, the extras that we have on our market on Main, we don't know the clarity of that. That could change, we don't know, but.
And that's, I think what we're saying is, some of us anyways, I don't know, but that it could change. So I think for all the years, this year we need to give people something to look forward to, to that, if we can safely do it. Obviously, we have to stick to the guidelines, but is there another way? And that's, I guess, what I'm asking. Is there another way you can do this? And can we look at other options? How does everybody else feel? Councilor Brown?
Yeah, I agree with that. Look at the options available to us, including postponing the opening and either a extended season at the end or possibly doubling up twice a week. Those are, again, just investigate our options and do it.
Okay. Councilor Phillips, did you have something to say?
No,
And then Councilor Roll.
I agree. We just need to look at our options as opposed to pulling it now, regretting that decision.
Councilor Roll?
I was just gonna agree with Randy. I think it'd be a shame to cancel it altogether until we know we have to. So I like the idea of postponing it until we know for sure.
So just proceed with planning and looking at the options of how we can do that. And then if there is no feasible way, make all the vendors realize that there still may be a cancellation if we have to.
I think it's much easier to continue with the planning. If we shut her down, it's easier to shut her down. If we want to restart it, it's much harder. So I'd say we just carry on with the planning and push the date back.
I think things are changing very quickly. Every day there are new rules and there are new relaxations. And yeah, Councilor Fraser, Councilor Alderson, did you want to weigh in?
Sure. Yeah, I know. I agree with what everything's been said. I don't think it should be canceled until we have to. If we have to, we will. I think it's too early right now, and I definitely think we should wait because things are changing. Just like they were changing before, now they're changing again with things opening. So I think we hold off and wait, and we hope that it goes forward. But if not, then we still have time to cancel it.
Okay, Councilor Fraser, and then Mr. Coe said something here.
I just think everything's gonna hinge on what comes down from AHS. So I agree. Right now they're saying no mass gatherings over the summer, and I would say this goes in that category, but they're also saying farmers markets are okay. So I think until we get something clearer, we should keep on planning it, because I agree that an outdoor market is a good thing for people in the summer if we can control the social distancing.
Mr. Krause?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So what I'm hearing from council is perhaps for us to explore options and bring it back to council on June 2nd.
Sure.
I think we'll have a clearer picture then, and then those decisions can be made. You just have to advise our vendors of that process.
Yeah, I don't think I will, we won't take registration or like that as far as, because I don't want to take money in reimbursement. It's not an issue as far as getting people registered in the last minute. Or maybe we don't take registration, maybe we just roll people on as they come across and set it up. It's more I'm not worried about the vendors, it's more the social distancing and public in regards to maintaining if there is a requirement for social distancing at that time.
And we may be required also to wear masks, right? So by that time, the hairdressers and other restaurants and whatnot are going to be open according to the plan anyway, so.
And, with public washrooms, the way, not allowed to have public washrooms, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to have. Some of them got to check as far as, we went ahead, are we allowed to have no washrooms
Right,
on site?
right.
That's just a minor, but at the same time, it
Yeah.
may be a deal breaker
Yeah.
in regards to washrooms. So.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Ray?
No, I'm good. We'll talk a little more later, I'm sure.
Okay.
Sure, nothing really, we're just gonna have to figure out a game plan forward.
So has everybody heard that then? And then we'll look at some more options and bring it back on June 2nd. Okay. And everybody's good for that? Okay. I think it's a good compromise, and who knows? I mean, we're all hoping for the best, right?
They may not even get that. They might not want to have you.
No, that's right, exactly. So, okay, so I guess I just need a motion. Councilor Ray?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to bring that conversation back to the June 2nd meeting with more information.
Renee, that's good. Got that? Did everybody hear that motion? Okay. All in favor of the motion? Okay, and that's carried. Thank you. Can I just go back now? Mr. Rose? I see we have our delegation, Mr. Lowe, on Zoom now. So we're going to go back to 4.2. Yeah. We're just going to do a quick audio check.
Hi, Doug. Can you hear us well?
I can hear you well.
Okay. Are you also watching on a different screen, or is this the only screen in front of you right now?
Unfortunately, this is the only screen in front of me, and I apologize to Her Worship and the esteemed council. I was battling some technical difficulties, which I'm usually pretty good at. So I'm actually on my phone being here, but I felt it was important I make the effort to be here and speak to you guys. So this is what we have. I'm in the Stone Age.
We just had a little feedback, which is why I inquired. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over back to the mayor. Once you're finished with your presentation and Q&A, I'm going to remove you from the meeting as outlined in the email, and then you can follow along with the YouTube live stream.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks, Laura. Okay, welcome, Doug.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, and esteemed councillors. I think everybody pretty much probably has a good idea from the submissions why we're here. Minor Football has been working with Wes, and he has graciously allowed Lisa Cheer some time to work with us as well, working on the CPIP grant for the funding proposal for lights for Curtis Field. We brought this back as the Masters Games Society granted the football team our stake in the project. So I hope you guys have the info where you can see it, but the basics is it's an estimated $275,000 worth of funding, 25 grand from the football club as our skin in the game, so to speak, and then 125 split between the town and the county, so 62.5 each, and then a matching CPIP grant of 125. So basically it works out to $25 for the town on it. What we're after today for the grant proposal is a letter of support. The mayor had given us one back about a year and a half ago when we had initially applied, but we felt we were better off coming to you guys for another one. Especially on this one, we are looking for you guys, I guess, to acknowledge that if the grant is successful, you guys are willing to fulfill your end to the commitment to make this project happen. Now it is in the 5-year rec plan, so it would just be basically moving it up a little bit. We are on the agenda to get the same letter from the county on May 12th, and then our submission date is May 15th. So we are coming down to crunch time a little bit as far as time goes, but obviously with all this COVID stuff happening, it has thrown a monkey wrench into some of the plans as to how quickly things can happen. But we really would like to make that May 15th application, so that hopefully we'll hear in July on the project. I know Lisa has been instrumental in helping get some quotes and doing some stuff that way as far as getting the grant application ready to go. So that's basically what we're after, is a letter of support from you guys, saying you understand what's, you know, your support and willing to do your end if successful from the CDEP people.
I think it's sorry. Okay. Thanks, Doug. Questions for Doug?
Yeah, fire away.
Anybody? Okay, I'm a question then. Have you considered any of the other user groups in on this application, Doug? Like, so anybody else that would use the field at night? Say the soccer group or
Yes,
rugby?
we are getting letters of support from soccer, from West Central, from Wild Rose as well, from the other user groups, but the application is coming in through Minerville.
Okay, thank you. Okay, does anybody have any other questions? No? No questions? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Yes, you too.
I appreciate your patience today, guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thanks, Doug. Okay, so I'm gonna skip down back to delegation business. 6.2. Discussion around our presentation. Anybody? How does council feel? Councillor Fraser?
So this is the same project that was applied for previously, but it didn't get the CFEP funding. Is that the lights for the football field? Does that include everything? Because I know there was some discussion about whether it included running the power or what kind of lights need to be installed because of the helicopters. I just don't want this to sneak up on us later.
Okay, I'll let Mr. Ament answer that.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, so I guess a little bit of background on this. This application did get submitted last year, and I guess due to the lack of clarity on where the football club was getting some funding, it was denied. Lisa's gone through the application last year. We've updated with quotes. We do have the flight path information on the helicopters, which looking at the flight path, they do not actually go over the football field at this point. So that's been clarified with the information that we have at hand. As far as the power goes, we did have Brad from Cinex was on site, you know, updated his quotes where the plan originally, I think, was to bring power from the spray park. So he's factored that potentially in the costs of the $275,000 project. Yeah, as Doug mentioned in his presentation, actually, I don't know if exact wording in the recreation master plan about the event, but it is in our 5-year capital plan, was bumped back to 2024 as we went through the budget this last year. So again, it's up to council, I guess, to decide of, you know, support of the project, number one. And then I know it's always hard to pre-commit to capital projects for 2021, basically. The application deadline, as Doug mentioned, is May 15th. According to the CFEP information, the announcement of the recipients is due in November, which would be right in time with our budget discussions. We would know whether or not, you know, the application was successful or not at that time. Council could, you know, say yay or nay to the budget commitment. But that's the information that we have available at this time. Lisa's done an excellent job of of putting the application together. It's basically, we're looking for those letters of support from both the town council, county councils. They've got the letters of support from all the other user groups, as well as the letter from the Masters Games indicating that they've set aside $25,000 to the football club for this project.
So if we offer a letter of support, that means we are committing, right? We are saying yes to the project. So I guess where I'm struggling right now is committing right now to next year's budget amongst all of what's taking place right now in the province, in the country, in the world. We don't know what's going to happen for our budget for 2021. And I see there's another intake in September and then again in January. So are you saying then that if we committed now, this project wouldn't be completed until next year anyways? Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. Yeah.
So then that does give us time to look and see what happens with the budget, what happens with the rest of this pandemic, the health crisis. And then we all know what's going to follow the health crisis is going to be possibly an economic crisis. And I think that gives us some time to look more at the budget and hopefully we can commit later on. That's where I'm standing. How does everybody else feel? Councillor Fraser?
I know that when this is over, whenever it's over, we will have an economy to kind of kickstart. And I know that obviously without being reckless, that any projects that we can do does put that money back out into the community. It does keep people employed. It keeps people working. So obviously without being reckless, I think that we should be looking at projects like this that we can keep things moving along when the time comes.
Okay, anybody else have any feedback? Councillor Alderson?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I do think that getting projects going is important. When I think of getting projects going, it usually means like a bunch of workers. To me, putting power in the ground isn't really putting that many people to work, which this would involve. I'm not against it at all. I do think it would be great for the community. But my concern too is like, is there money available? It is for recreation. So like maybe there's X amount of dollars in reserves, but how much are we willing to commit to that? And for the user groups, yes, there's a lot of letters for support, but do they all get to use the field? Or, is it the football club? That's my one question to town, I guess, would be, how does that work if we went forward with that? Because there's a lot of people committing their support. They probably want use of the field as well, but there's one club right now that I'm aware of, which is the football club.
Okay, thank you. I have Mr. Ament and then I have Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, I think I can answer that question, Councillor Alderson. Is that my understanding is that is football, soccer, rugby, all three of those are user groups. And then of course in the winter time with the skating oval is a big plus to have that lit as well.
I do like this process from the point of view that more than one user group is going to benefit from it. And we're working with 25 cent dollars. So for every dollar that goes in, we're only actually paying 25 cents of that. I do like it from that aspect. I had a question. I'm not sure Dean will be able to answer this or not, but do we have a capital reserve for rec that would be able to cover this?
Worship, actually, that's following today's agenda is councillors' reserves and allocation. So I can bring it up and let you know right now. But from an administrative point of view, I always recommend the council is to look at all your capital projects in the budget at the same time. There's going to be a lot of competing projects with limited dollars. And to commit to this now would take $62,000 out of that discussion. There are several intakes a year for CFEP, like in September or January. So it still could be a 2021 project, but you wouldn't be committing that money until those intakes. So that way council could at least review this project with other projects for.
Thank you. Councillor Auld?
I would be much more comfortable waiting until the next intake, just to see where we're at financially, where the community's at, and it's not going to get done until next year anyway. They still have time to do it. If they apply in September or January, it could still be a 2021 project. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I stand too. I think this is a great project. I really do. I just want to make sure that, you know, we kind of have a better picture. Councillor Alderson?
Yeah, I just wanted to second what Councillor Auld said, because by not doing a letter right now doesn't mean we're unsupportive. We are. It sounds to me like we're all very supportive of this. It's just a matter of timing, because when this came forward last time, we didn't have a COVID crisis, and we have a lot more going on right now. And I do want to see this go forward. I think that there's some time still, and I think it would make sense, just like Councillor Auld said, to wait for the next intake.
Yeah. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I would echo those comments from both councillors. It's a matter of timing, and I think with everything that's going on, I just assume hold off. It's already on the 5-year capital, so it's not like it's being ignored.
No, I agree. It's there. It's in the planning stages. Whether or not we commit those funds now is basically the question, or do we wait until the fall? Councillor Fraser?
Are we able to provide a letter of support for them to do the intake now and still look at it later? Just because I know sometimes you need to submit multiple applications to get things. Is there a way that, because I think we are supportive of this project, I just don't want them to miss out on applying? Or would they need to use that within a certain amount of time? Does that hamstring them later?
Turn that over to Mr. Krause.
No, Your Worship, if we're putting a letter of support, we're committing the funding to the project, and that's what CFEP bases their approvals on.
Did everybody hear that? Okay. Yeah. I guess that was, you know, my comment earlier is with the letter goes the money, right? It's not like we can, you know, wait until November and then decide if we want to put it in the budget, because we've already supported and we've already set aside the funds to do that. Councillor Alderson?
If we decide, like, whatever comes out of this, if we decide right now is not the time to write the letter of support, it would still be nice to give them a letter explaining that we are supportive, or some sort of communication. You know, they're probably watching as well right now, but let them know we are supportive. But, you know, just based on the timing, we can't give that letter or whatever, depending on how we vote on this. But I still want them to know that they are supported if we don't follow through with that letter currently.
We could write a letter just saying, you know, thanking them for their commitment to the clubs and encouraging them to please have understanding with why we've postponed this support letter, but just telling them that, you know, we do stand behind the project. We think it's a good project, something along that line. Yeah, sound good? Everybody good with that? It's just that we can't commit to those funds yet. We just don't know what's going to happen in the next 4 or 5 months. So, but I like the project. I think we all like the project. That's very clear. It's a good project. It'll help, you know, like you said, with the skating as well in the winter. So it's a good year-round project. So, okay, so I'll just need a motion then that we'll read. To send, yeah. Oh, sure, please, if you've got something.
Resolve that council postpone the letter of support until the next intake of the CFEP grant to enable council to reassess the current COVID-19 environment and community needs.
Did everybody hear that? Probably not. Did you? Okay. Renee, sorry, can you come closer and
sure
and read? Oh, there was a cup.
Coffee. Did you hear that? Okay, so be it resolved that council postpone the letter of support until the next intake of the CFAP grant to enable council to reassess the current COVID-19 environment and community needs.
I found myself leaning in to listen. Did everybody hear that? Councillor Alderson. Okay, thanks, Renee. Councillor Brown is making that motion. Story goes back. Okay, all in favor of that motion? Okay, and that's carried. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to number 8.2, waiving of the tennis court fees. And, right? No.
Yes.
Yes. No. Let me get back on track here. Yes, we just did the delegation business, did the mark on me. So I'm turning that over to, oh, Mr. Sorry.
Okay, you got me again. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I'm bringing forward to you a request for decision related to the tennis courts use. And as you're aware, with the latest round of openings of facilities as far as outdoor recreation goes, tennis courts are permitted as a use, following AHS regulations and guidelines. So I know that the Parks Department has already been on site. They've put the tennis nets up. They've cleaned the courts. The courts are unlocked. We have received several inquiries about the use of the courts. Now, the one thing that we were scheduled to do this spring was to implement a new rates and fees and a facility booking process for the tennis courts. Now, unfortunately, with our the Christensen Center, guest services, and the Aquatic Center being closed, we don't have the capability at this point of taking payment for the use of the tennis courts. So my request before you today is basically just to postpone the implementation of the rates and fees and booking procedure for the use of the tennis courts. We've drafted some signage that will be related to the use of the tennis and pickleball courts, is that, they're open for limited use. We restrict the number of people that are on the courts to, 2 people per court, or a maximum of 6 people, since we have 3 courts, unless they're within a family group where they can do their social isolation as per AHS requests, and follow the hand washing, sanitizing. We won't have those materials on site, but be incumbent on the users to follow those procedures. So I guess the recommendation to council is just to delay the implementation of the rates and fees and the facility booking procedure until we are actually, all of our facilities are open to the public.
Okay, thank you. Questions for council, from council? Councilor Brown?
Yeah, I support this. In the phone calls that I had with some of the residents, this was specifically mentioned. They weren't concerned. They were wondering why it was the pickleball tennis courts weren't open when it fell within the guidelines of AHS. So I would support this.
Any other questions? Councilor Fraser?
I was just gonna say it's a lot like the Sandy dump. We don't have the people to collect the funds and supervise the courts, so I think it makes sense to open them up so people can get outside if they need to.
Okay. Yeah, I think it makes sense, and there will be signs up that they can't have more than X number of people there and regulations, and I think it's a good thing that we can open up the more things we can. Okay, so we have a recommended alternative. Phillips?
I'll make a motion that council move to delay the implementation of new rates and fees as well as facility booking procedure for the tennis/pickleball courts until the Alberta government lifts the current restrictions on public access to recreation facilities and direct administration of signage related to the limited use of the tennis pickleball courts during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Everybody's clear of that motion? Okay, all in favor of that motion? Okay, that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we move on to 8.3, reallocation of restricted, unrestricted surplus. That's Betty.
If you can't hear me, let me know and we can adjust the mic.
Can you guys hear Betty? We're going to move the mic closer to Betty. It's probably easier anyways because once the round probably can.
Yeah.
All right, so this one is basically taking, we passed a policy last year on the surplus reserves and redid them. So this policy is taking the current year's surplus as well as the prior year's unrestricted surpluses and suggesting an allocation method to move them out to the new reserves. So I think the easiest is just to look at the schedules rather than go through the briefing note because it's really just talking about what we're doing. The first schedule just shows you what your surplus reserves were in the prior life, what reserves we had in place, as well as the 2019 opening balances and what activities happened during 2019. So there was some additions, monies that we pulled out for different capital projects, monies that we spent, and then the interest allocations. And the second sheet shows you kind of a summary of how we took the money and reallocated it. So section A shows in total we have 15 million. 7.3 of that is in restricted and 7.8 is in unrestricted. B shows the balances that are carried forward. So there's existing funds already in the reserves for 1.6 million. So the amount that's left to be allocated out is basically 13.5 million. The policy basically says we should keep some as unrestricted, and that's in the event that you have, say, a dire emergency and you need some money. So setting that a little bit higher than we recommend at 1.5, given the year that we're having. And also recommending that we take the surplus from 2019, which is 706,000, and leaving that in the unallocated or unrestricted reserve. And then there's a Lagoon County restricted surplus that we have to pull out. So basically there's $10.9 million that can be reallocated. Item D shows sort of the methodology. We're using the TCA balances. So that tends to reflect your amount of money that you spend on capital. Roads and water probably, and wastewater being the bulk of your assets and buildings. So each one is identified as a percent. So based on those percentages, we would suggest allocating the 10.9 million based on those. And then that would translate into your new reserve. So really we're just doing a bit of a shuffle and keeping some monies back in the unrestricted so that this year if we have some unidentified issues or things we want to spend money on, it's available. Is there any questions on that?
I just want to comment that I think it's really smart that we keep the extra, that we up to 1.5 million this year for the unrestricted. So I like that idea. I don't know how everybody else feels.
I like that idea, just with the uncertainty we're going into in the fall period. I just like having a little extra in there.
Yeah. Anybody else? Councillor Narang?
Yeah, I just want to say the allocations are great. I think that makes good sense. So, and it's a real simple way to make that decision and allocate them.
And in the future, if you ever needed money, like say we had a huge project and it was a building and you didn't have enough money in the building reserve, you can always move money between reserves with a council motion. So you
Okay.
do have the flexibility.
No,
It
I
just
like this.
kind of helps us plan.
It's very clear and I like that it has the policy maximum as well.
Yeah.
So, any questions from the Zoom team? Councillor Fraser? Okay.
I was just gonna say I really like how Section D breaks it up. I know it's sometimes when you see $15 million, it's hard to explain to people what you're putting money away for. This makes it really clear and it shows how much we spend and how much we're putting away. It's very good. Thank you, Betty.
Yeah, no, it's a very good report.
This was prepared by Brenda, so
Oh,
I won't take credit for it.
we'll make sure to say.
It's a crossover.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Questions? Pretty clear. Okay. We have the motion in front of us. Everybody see the motion in front of us? What are council's wishes? Councilor Brown?
I'd like to make the motion that council approve the recommended reallocation of restricted/unrestricted surplus funds and the report be attached and form part of the minutes.
Okay. Pretty clear on that? Okay. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. Thanks again, Penny.
Okay.
Now we're going to move on to 8.4. And I'm turning that over to Betty again. Okay.
Sorry, it's a little heavy on numbers this week.
There's an intense agenda package this week.
So this is your first quarter financial statements, and as we presented last fall, we will be presenting these on a regular basis. So you'll start to get a feel for them, and we can also look at if you want additional information, that kind of thing. So basically, these are your March. Oh, I have a 3 months period. March quarterly statements. It consists of a statement. I do some graphs. I also give you a very high level overview or variance report, and I'll walk through that. As well as this time I've been able to attach capital statements. When we did the one last fall, it was just too soon. Just a comment, we're still building these statements by scratch because we haven't done the conversion yet. So we have budget in one chart, actuals in another. So there's a little bit of work, but next quarter, hopefully we'll have it all done. Basically, your operating statement, if we look at the transfers, it's showing a deficit of 142,000. Before transfers, there's actually a surplus of 509. What that's showing me is that really it's some timing differences. It's nothing that I would be overly alarmed about. There's some timing differences with some expenditures that happen at the beginning of the year, and they'll even themselves out. But it shows that we're running really close to the edge, which is, that's good. You don't want to have too much slack in your budget. So we are very fine-tuned.
Betty, sorry, before you go ahead, can you just give an example of what that is then?
So some of the rentals and leases, the airport leases were all billed at the beginning of the year. So those are being expensed. Let me see. There was a couple. I'm making me think on the spot. Legal and contracted services are higher than our budget. That's part of that was some of the mediation, we had extra contractors. That's going to drop off in the beginning. Where else?
That's good.
So
just gave me an example.
So I'll walk through. I'm going to just go through the statement. So if you look at the statements, I like to do the revenues by type of expense or by type of revenue. So rather than saying administration collected this much in revenue, it's showing you kind of what the sources are. I've also split the user fees into 3 categories because it's one of your, one of your biggest revenues, but it comes from 3 major sources. One is general sales and fees. The other is recreation, which is very specific, and the other is the utilities. So I've split them out so they don't show as like 5 million, but it gives you a better feel for, there's 73,000 in general fees, whereas your recreation, it's about almost 500,000, and the utility sales and fees is 4.6. So it's quite significant, and I find it's nice to be able to see that breakdown. If you kind of look at that and the variance, the taxes, we accrue them over the years, so because otherwise you'll have huge fluctuations. So I always accrue, this 25% is accrued for taxes. So we're sitting right on target. General sales is higher, it's at 51%. And partly that's because we've got the mediation revenue coming in because we're billing out a portion of the mediation. The mediation charges, we show them as an expense and then we're billing to the county and no longer to the village of Caroline, but there's some mediation fees coming in. Recreation revenue is just slightly below the first quarter, but the Rocky Passes, they're right on target. So they're, for the first quarter, they were sitting at 25% with just some other minor variations. Utility revenue is just slightly below our target rate of 25%. But when I look at that, it's winter, so that makes sense because in the summer we usually see higher rates. Fines and penalties, there's 3 major areas there. There's RCMP and bylaw and taxes. They're all a little on the high side. It's sitting at 81%, and that's because the tax bylaw, the taxes, there's I think it's a 10% assessment that's assessed on January 1st. Permits and licenses, again, they're billed at the start of the year. So that's a little bit higher, and as the year progresses, that will continue on down. Franchise fees are on target. Return on investments is low. The interest rates, the bank's been dropping the interest rate on our Mosh account, and that started kind of in February. So we're not seeing as big a return as expected. Rentals and leases, it's on target. And again, the airport leases were billed out at the beginning of the year. And contributions and sponsorships, we're trying to separate some of the naming rights and different monies that we get. It's sitting at 45%. Oh, sorry, I have the wrong big copy there. My apologies. It says airport leases. It's basically sitting a little higher, and that's probably due to the billing. So ignore that comment. Under the expenditures, so revenues are coming in basically at 26%. And if you look at expenditures, they're coming in at about the same. So we're pretty even right now. The first quarter requisitions have been made to the schools, and the seniors requisition was accrued. Council budget's on target. Good job, you guys. Administration's a little higher, and when I looked at that, the legal and contracted services were higher. Those, I mean, we had some unusual events and extra consulting fees. Again, those should start to drop off to basically zero.
It's the legal fees for the 212 negotiations.
Oh,
That's
okay.
really what's taking us there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Protective services, we accrued the first quarter for RCMP, and the fire billing, we only received that at the very end of the year, but so it's been accrued. Operations and infrastructure, basically when I looked at it, everybody was coming in right on target, so there no variations there. Utilities is coming in under, and this one was a tough one to budget because there was sort of a lot of different pieces, and some of the numbers, I had trouble making them all kind of flow through. So I think we'll watch this. But basically, water services is running below budget at about 13%. But because we make our own water, our expenses aren't huge in that area. I'm used to buying the water from Red Deer, so that's a huge cost. The same with sewers, operating at 12%, so it's low. I'm not sure if that's in the winter. It might be a seasonal fluctuation that they don't have as much activity, and then in the summer it picks up. Solid waste is operating at 22%, so again, that's pretty reasonable. It's falling in line. And the waste contract at the regional landfill, it was accrued for 3 months. So we'll keep an eye on that area because it is quite a bit under budget. Social services is sitting, and there's one where we've dispersed quite a bit of money. Social services, the regular operations are all on track, but they did issue 94% of their grant monies. So there was over 300,000 that's been issued in January to all of the grants. So again, that's only going to happen in January, and that will draw itself down. Planning and development's on track, and recreation and parks is a little bit higher, but parks was at 10%, and I'm assuming that it's gonna, well, this year for recreation, the budget is gonna be very unusual. I'll say that. So basically your operations, you're sitting good. I mean, we want to keep an eye on it, but it's not anything that I would be overly concerned about. The capital statement, I've given you a consolidated statement as well as detailed project listings. What I like to do, and I showed this split up because once we get the year end done, I always look and see how much money is left for projects and what projects aren't done. So there is a listing of projects that are not completed. They total almost $8.2 million that we will carry forward. In the past, I'm not sure how it was handled, but I like to include it in the budget because then we don't lose that money. It's not kind of floating and we don't spend it twice. And then for the 2020 budget, we had $4.6 million. So we've got a total of almost $12.8 million in capital projects. We've only spent $650,000. That's really typical. Usually start of the year, everybody's planning, getting their RFPs out. They might have bought if there's some small equipment they can purchase, but usually we don't spend a whole lot. Capital is hard to track because sometimes with the really big projects, we don't get the payments even till November, December. So it's a long cycle. And then there's a listing here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but in the future, we'll try to, I do like to have a comment line, and I like to send this out to the directors and ask them to provide a comment on the status of their projects so that we can kind of see. If you look, you can see we've bought the four posted speed signs are purchased. We've started working on a splash park, working on the ice plant at the Christensen Center. And then the next page is basically a listing of the projects that have funds remaining. And there was some money spent on that. Is there any questions?
No, another good report. This very well laid out. Lots to read, but very well laid out. Any questions from Zoom?
Nope. Looks really good.
It's really helpful for us, especially to like show that we're staying on top. And
Yeah.
being able to answer questions and see where we're going. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I usually do those like for March, June, and then the September. December quarterly statements, I don't like to do them, like I do them once you get the audited statements because there's so many changes and journal entries that happen. It's just about impossible to do. So. Okay. Okay, this is the tricky one. I'm sorry.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Phillips.
I was just gonna make a comment regarding the how much COVID is gonna impact especially when you look at recreational sales and fees, are we gonna track kind of how much that's anticipating costing us?
Yeah, your worship, so, Ms. Quinlan will be doing projections and as we try to move forward toward where they get along in different scenarios.
That's next. As soon as I had to get the March statements done, we had to get the year end done. And
Yeah, and I realize COVID.
so, the COVID projection is next. So, yes, so I'll start working on that this week.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilor Fraser?
It was more about the COVID numbers that we're looking at. I've heard a few municipalities mention that they have declared local states of emergency so that they're applicable for funding when this is over. Do we need to do that? Or does that not apply to us? I just don't want us to miss the boat there.
Your worship, so our conversation with the province, even if you declare a local state of emergency, there's no funding for this pandemic through that Alberta emergency funding.
So we don't want to do that then?
No.
Yeah, so. Okay, thanks for the question. Any others? Okay, seeing none. I'll make the motion that council accept the March 31st, 2020 operating capital statement and variance report for information. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you.
No, I think I'm okay.
Okay, we're gonna go to 8.5. The tax bylaw.
Okay, so this one's big and it is, I'll try to explain it as easily as possible. There are so many moving parts in this that it does get very, very confusing and complex. To me, there's three things I want to try to explain or highlight today. One is what your final assessment looks like. Two, well, is the tax rates and how the assessment has impacted them and how much we're collecting. And the third thing is to have a discussion about the educational property tax deferral and how they've given us some options, but how that lays out and how that'll impact people. Okay, so I'm going to go through, I tried to provide highlights, so I'm going to go through them just because I think it gives us some background. So tax increases are normally based on CPI. This year, just because the economy was lagging a little bit, council chose to implement a 0% tax increase. So we're collecting the same amount of dollars basically as previous years. The split between residential and non-residential has been maintained at the same rates as prior years. So there's been no adjustment between those. The final assessment contains deflation of about $7 million. When we did the budget, sometimes the assessor just doesn't have that information yet. So we basically look at just new assessment, of which there was virtually none. So the whole change is deflation. The taxable assessment's gone from 919 million to 912. The majority of the deflation is showing up in residential with about 6.28 million, and which is almost a 1% decrease. And then non-residential went down by 838,000. Okay. Just a note, and the 2020 educational tax rates, they're set by the province and they're based on our equalized assessment, which is not our. So they equalize all the assessments and then calculate how much each town has to collect, and then we base it on our live assessment. So there's a bit of stepping going on there. The province has also advised that they are deferring 50% of the non-residential educational tax will be deferred for 6 months. And I'd like to talk about that at the end, just so we don't mix things up. I've included the regular requisition in the bylaw because the deferral is going to be dealt with through dates and how they'll be submitting, because you can't split them. And I do talk about this. There's two methodologies that they've provided us. One is to defer 6 months of taxes to September 30th, which is, they're saying the taxes, their fiscal year is April 1. So they're going from April 1 to September 30th, which I do have a little trouble wrapping my head around because the taxes aren't collected till June 30th. So it's a little hard to understand. So they've said you can defer to the end of September, or if you don't do that, then basically you would have to sort of create some different tax rates within your software to create this deferral, which would be very difficult to do. I have attached a frequently FAQ on that deferral. We've already amended our property tax penalty bylaw to waive any penalties. So we do have a due date, but basically we're also being very cognizant of residents, whether they're residential or commercial, that if they defer and don't pay all their taxes until December 31st, there will be no penalties. So we've done that. And there's several analysis, and I do have a variance by category. So the table on the next page basically is outlining the taxes that are in the bylaw. So there's your assessment is broken down by your various categories. It shows the mill rate and how much money is collected off of each class. It's 9.2 million for municipal, 2.7, almost 2.8 for Alberta School Foundation. Rocky Senior Housing is 81,000, and then we've got designated industrial for 885. That's a new category. Just a little bit of comment on the School Foundation. It's about 114,000 of under levy included in this from 114,939 is what it is. That was under collected in 2019. The reason for this is back in 2019, they didn't get the educational tax rates until quite late in the year. So they told everybody just to use the 2018 rates. So what happened was when they did finally set the levy, it had gone up. So we under collected by that much. So we now have to collect that in this year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so even though it does say 0% tax or an increase to the requisition,
yeah,
it's just for playing catch up from 2018.
There's going to be a small adjustment, and that's because we under levied because we didn't have the actual rates. Does that make sense?
Everybody good with that? Any questions around that? Okay.
So in total, we're basically collecting $12 million, 9 million of which is for the town, and the balance is for schools and other parties. Okay. The next page, I just tried to give you a really high level view of what the changes are in total assessment. So it's a 1% drop on residential and non-residential. I also, and it's also included in the appendixes, but I also try to show what the impact is on residential taxes. And there is little increases, and it just, again, you've got so many moving parts. You've got, 10 different tax rates. You've got all these different, there's 10 major tax classes, 5 different tax categories. There's almost 3,100 taxable properties. The assessments have gone up and down, so it does change things. Some people, if their assessment went up, they would pay a little bit more. But on average, an average residential property will see a $7 change. And it will range, townhouses they had the biggest deflationary adjustment. So townhouses will likely see an average of $210 decrease in taxes. And then there's a range all the way up to apartment condos might see up to a $76 increase. So it depended on sort of what the sales were looking like last year and how they were assessed. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
I guess, when can we expect the assessment notices?
Well, then we need to talk about the dates. We have a little bit of flexibility. Typically, the town of Rocky collects, the tax deadline is July 31st. With this deferral, I have suggested that you could look at moving the tax deadline date to August 31st. Because they've offered you two ways to do it. You can defer just the education portion, which makes it really difficult to explain to people, well, you don't know this for a while, but you owe this. Or they said you can do a combined method. So they're saying you need to give at least a 6-month deferral. So if somebody owed $100 and you're deferring it for 6 months, they say take the 100 times 6. So you have to give them at least a $600 equivalent deferral. It's kind of crazy. So if you gave them a deferral of, and say their taxes were $1,000, or everything, and you deferred it for 1 month, then it's 1,000 times 1 month. So that's $1,000 deferral. So then you've given them the equivalent of a $600 deferral over 6 months, but you've given it to them all in 1 month. So that's how they're calculating what your options are. When I look at it, we're already, typically taxes are due June 30th, so we've always gone July. But if you move the deadline date to August 31st, we satisfy the educational requirements for giving them an equivalency without making it so that we've got to reprogram the system, which is almost impossible to do. But we give them a deferral, plus we've given them no penalties. So if there's even issues with not being able to pay by August 31st, we will work with residents, commercial or residential, to help them with their tax.
And how does that affect us as an organization by deferring that for the extra month?
It would, I didn't calculate what it would be, but it would cost us potentially some interest. I should have gone and looked. I mean, it might cost you, like, say if you collected $5 million worth of your taxes in that 1 month and we're only getting like 1%, you know, it's gonna cost you some interest revenue, but really that's all. It would also, we're utilizing our working capital more because those funds aren't coming in. But we do have a lot of people on the monthly tax plan, so we are getting money in every month. So it just makes us just watching our cash flow. So it would be some lost interest revenue.
What about the monthly payments? Are people wanting to opt out of those as well? Or have you had many calls?
I haven't checked to see if there's been a lot of change. I know we've been getting phone calls. The tax clerk Louise has been really working with people. We don't want people to discontinue. What we suggest is if they're having trouble meeting even that payment, we suggest just drop the payment down and stay on the tips. And then, you know, if things go back to normal and you're able to make more payments, then call and we'll increase it. We're also encouraging people that aren't on tips, that even if, you know, if they're having troubles, it's a good way to budget and to make sure that, you know, at least you're putting something in there and we know, so that we know that you're actively trying to make it happen. So, it's been a good tool, but we've been really working with people.
I just have a question regarding because we're not paying or doing any penalties anymore.
Right.
How is that going to impact the budget?
When we looked at the penalties, it was about $40,000 in penalties for the August and then the fall penalty that potentially will be foregoing. So there is lost revenue, but I mean, I think it's worth it in the sense. Yeah.
Any on your report?
I'm just looking at what I provided you in the back. Really, it's just some more details. So the 2020 assessment, it shows you by category what the big inflation and deflation was. So just looking at it, you can see that single family homes were decreased by $3 million. So it shows you where the deflationary pressures were showing up. And then the rest is really just kind of providing you with some background. And then I like to do an analysis of average property taxes for residential and just kind of where everybody's falling.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what's this going to do for 2021? If the assessment keeps dropping, what can we expect? Like, what are we doing now to start looking ahead to 2021?
I guess it would depend on what council chooses. I mean, typically in my past lives, we've always maintained our tax base. So you collect $9 million, and if we continue to want to collect that tax, and assessment goes down, people will still continue to pay the same amount of taxes. It's just the tax rate goes up because the assessment's dropping. So it's just your math equation.
The mill rate.
Yeah. So it's the item that floats. I think if you were to decide that you wanted less tax, then you'd have to start doing service level reviews to determine what services you were not going to provide. That's.
Well, I mean, that's further down the road, I guess, when hopefully we don't have to make those decisions, but it's something that's been on my mind and it's been asked as well. So.
I mean, your two sources of revenue are tax dollars and user fees. So you either increase your other fees or you decrease your expenditures. So.
Does anybody have any questions? Any other? No, on this side? Okay. Thanks, Betty. This is another really good report. You have been really busy. I know that. We all know that. But this is really, it helps to explain a lot for citizens, and
it's good. Thank you.
So we have a couple of alternatives. We have two different motions here. Actually, three. What does council want to do?
Make the motion that council approve changing the deadline for property taxes from July 31st to August 31st to recognize the 6-month deferral for the non-residential property taxes provided by the government of Alberta.
Thank you. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. Councillor Alderson?
I'll make the motion that council give first reading to bylaw 2020/12, being a bylaw for the 2020 rates of taxation.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Okay, and that's carried. Thank you. Councillor Ald,
I'll make the motion that council gives second reading to bylaw 2020/12 being a bylaw for the 2020 rates of taxation.
okay, thank you. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried, thank you. Councillor Fraser, did you have your hand up? Okay. For what, Councillor Fraser?
Oh, sorry. Voting. I will do recommend unanimous consent.
Sorry, I saw your hand there. So pleasant. Okay, so you're making the next motion?
Yes. I move that we give unanimous consent to tax rate bylaw 2020/12.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you. Councillor Phillips?
I'll make a motion that council gives third and final reading to bylaw 2019/12 being a bylaw for the 2019 rates of taxation.
Thank you. All in favor of that motion? Okay, carried. Thank you.
Did we get the motion though? The second one isn't made. Deferring education and property tax.
The property tax. Your worship, that was covered in the first one by changing our due date to August 31st. We meet the requirements of the province.
Thank you.
Thanks for pointing that out. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much again. We'll move on to 8.6, the COVID recovery verbal report by council. So, we had an assignment, and we're all to call residents and businesses. So I'm looking for comments and feedback on what you've heard. Councillor Lorraine.
Well, I think what everybody's experienced.
No. Can you hear us again?
We can.
Oh, we can.
I just thought you were all wanting to say something. That's why I was going, yeah.
Excited. Oh, homework.
Okay.
No, just everybody that I spoke to was really happy with how the town has responded to COVID. I didn't get a lot of ideas, but most of them are really aware of the responsibilities of the different level of government. And so we're basically any type of, I don't want to say criticism, but criticism was geared towards either the provincial or federal response. And they thought that the town was doing everything that they could, and we're quite happy. And actually, we're not as negatively impacted by having to stay home as I thought they might be. So lots of people like, oh no, we're enjoying it, we're gardening, we're doing this. I don't know if I just happened to get, I don't know how to just happen to get a lot of our senior citizen residents, but they had stated that they've had lots of support from their families and that they're enjoying their time at home. Yeah, it was all positive. I was nervous, but it was got lots of positives. So.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I echo that 100%. Very few suggestions. The only suggestion that came up more than once was to loosen restrictions as much as was within our power in the recreation and the things, the mental health aspect. I was very surprised at the businesses that I talked to that were directly affected by the COVID. They were all upbeat. They were all convinced that once we got through this, they were going to have no problem at all with recovery. One individual in particular lost 80 to 90% of his business, has laid off just about everybody in the staff, and he was as upbeat as anybody else was, and we'll get through this just fine. And yeah, it was quite a surprising experience. So that's fine.
Okay, thank you. I kind of had the same. I had a much appreciation for keeping the town walking trail open and the playgrounds, and they appreciated the signage as well. to just remind people about the social distancing and all the regulations. So, yeah, it was pretty good that way. Let's see here. So I had some recommendations from business groups to have a meeting with myself and a couple of councillors and about 12 business owners, because we have to stay within the 15 gathering or less, just to kind of brainstorm and start thinking of possibilities when we get out of this. So I don't know what everybody feels about that, but my other question would be for Mr. Schwader. We used to have a downtown business association. So could we change that to just a business so that it encompasses all businesses, and maybe we could meet quarterly to check in on everybody?
But just to update, it's been enacted for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
A couple of champions on the street will take on projects, ideally Easter and Halloween. But as far as getting participation, we had difficulty, and the businesses that were participating were getting frustrated with the other ones. But not saying we can't move forward, other than just real history. So yeah, we can expand it to whatever we'd like, I guess. Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting to get, even to have one or two, you know, rather than, you know, meeting on just kind of focusing on recovery of this particular pandemic and economic, the double whammy, right, of everything. And get a cross section of different businesses, so small business, long-term businesses, whatever. Councillor Phillips?
So basically, you know, echoing the same thing as whatever else is saying, they agree with the town.
Sorry, Councillor Phillips, would you mind if we just finish this one conversation in, and then, okay, because I think Councillor Alderson had a comment to my comment, and I think
Yeah, I like the idea. A couple things though. For one, I think it's a lot easier to coordinate something that's smaller. However, I'd hate to handpick 12 businesses and exclude a bunch of other ones. Yes, we can only fit 15 people in a room. We can fit to a few hundred over Zoom. But so I'd like to know maybe the list of people that would actually like to be part of that, and maybe we can coordinate something a lot like this, but it'd just be on a grander scale and somebody that kind of can run it so that not everybody's trying to speak at the same time. But I'd hate to just cherry pick 12 businesses.
right, and I think we would put a call out to see who's interested in being on a committee such as that, and then kind of go forward with the amount of people that we get. Councillor All, did you have something to say on that?
No, I think it's a great idea. But like Councillor Alderson says, we'd have to put it out to everybody, to the big businesses, small businesses, the home businesses, everybody. Might be pretty tough to organize that in a meeting. I'm not sure exactly how we could do that.
Kind of like a virtual town hall, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have said that, and I think it's important to our businesses. So I'm willing to brainstorm with people to see how we can make that go forward. Councillor Fraser, did you have something to add on to that conversation? Or is it you?
just for maybe some technical ideas for town hall. I know that we stream this on YouTube, and there's a comment section, and I know that I've seen a lot of interactive stuff happening with a live feed either on YouTube or on Facebook, and they live feed the discussion. There's a moderator that goes through the comments and reads the comments, so there can be kind of a back and forth, but not everybody needs to be on video, and people can put their comments and suggestions in and not have to be front and center.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, a lot of people are doing that right now on Facebook. So yeah good idea. Councillor Alderson? Oh, she muted.
Sorry, I didn't realize that. Along those same lines, I think that, yes, there should be a moderator, and a lot of people may not be having to say something because it's maybe already been said. So you're going to find there's going to be a lot of the same comments that come up. Those can be put on a whiteboard or a piece of paper, whatever, that we can, it can kind of accumulate all this, whatever the suggestions are. There's going to be a few major things that come out of that we can break down into different categories, but I don't think it has to be as messy as it sounds. I think it can be, as long as there's a moderator, it can, just like when we're entering a room and trying to look at whatever we're looking at, it can be done smoothly depending on how we run things. But yeah, I think there should be certain things that are put into different categories, things that are said. We can look at those main things that are repeated over and over and kind of take it from there.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Any other comments on that suggestion? Mr. Kravosek, is that doable?
Your worship, that's why you have us, to make wishes come true, so. And,
okay.
we can figure it out.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Phillips, then, for your feedback.
So, yeah, I mean, echoing a lot of what's been said already, the residents are happy with the way the town is effectively handling the situation. Feeling a little bit of uncertainty when it comes to things being reopened. They want Market on Main was one of the big things that I had, that people want Market on Main back as soon as possible. And opening up all, the rec building it. Whenever we can do it as quick as possible to allow people to get back and improve. And buy local. I heard that from a lot of the businesses. How can we create something, a program to make people or incentivize them to buy local? Because some of the businesses aren't going to come out of this after COVID. And we want to make sure that big business, small business, medium size, that we're encouraging the townspeople to go to those businesses, because those are the ones that are going to support the baseball teams and the hockey teams and all of that come fall when we get back into the stream of things. Even a community barbecue was a suggestion, to celebrate once you're out of this, have a celebration to say thank you residents for getting through this, celebrating it. And stopping the second wave of COVID. That was a concern that I heard, is that great, we can get through this, but we don't want to repeat it in the fall. So how does the second wave stop?
And again, it's not our provincial. And
No.
I mean, nobody wants to see that. We don't want to have to go through this,
No.
which is why, we do need to follow specifically what was being recommended.
But the buy local was, I heard that from quite a few, to try and incentivize people to buy local, keep our businesses going.
Councillor Alderson, and then Councillor.
Yeah, some great things in there. Also, I'm a little, some things that are a little concerned based on making people buy anything. I love the idea of encouraging people to buy local. I highly encourage that. But to force people or make people, that kind of takes away free enterprise, democracy, making people do anything. If we did that, there'd be a bigger issue at hand. But I love the idea of encouraging buy local.
Yeah, we can't make anybody buy it local, but yeah, definitely. And I think that was last council meeting, Councilor Fraser made the suggestion of helping businesses get more online and promote that way. Because a lot of people maybe are still going to want to shop online. And if we have local businesses that are set up to do that, all the better. So, Councilor Fraser, did you have a comment as well?
Yeah, I guess specifically related to the shop local. One of the interesting things that I heard when I was talking to people was that as online retailers, the big ones, Amazon and it, get busy, and as those shipping dates get pushed out, I know a lot of people said, oh, well, I had to go shop local. I had to go look around because I needed this before a month from now. I can't order online. So it's actually, I've heard a lot of people say, I didn't know we had this store. I didn't know this store had that. So it's kind of made them shift their perspective. And I know a lot of people are actively trying to shop local. So I think that in some ways, this is kind of, it hasn't forced people, but it has certainly incentivized it by, if you need it this week, you probably need to look locally for it. So that was one of the perks. The other one was the online gap. I know some of the business owners I talked to said that even if they were able to have an online store where people could see what they had, that would help people get in the store and help people call. I know that there was a few stores that once they got pictures of their stuff up on Facebook, they were flooded with orders, and they had to, get more people in to help. So even just kind of that shift in, you don't have to be Amazon to make it online, but it does make your store more accessible.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, thank you. Did you have anything else, Councillor Phillips, on your? Okay. Councillor.
Just a couple more additions there. At least 50% of the people, businesses that I talked to were involved in the oil field. So they kind of got lucky in that this is spring breakup, and we're not affected nearly as badly as they might otherwise have been if the timing had been different with COVID. I had people as well talking about buying local, and again, it was more of an encouragement as opposed to asking people to do it. I did have one person I thought I'd tell you, Mayor, that was glad that the walking trails are not one way.
Okay. I didn't have enough coffee that
I
morning.
feel like there's gonna be t-shirts made or something about this post-COVID.
And my last comment is this phone call exercise of reaching out was, I think, very worthwhile. My only concern is that we need to find a different way of reaching out.
Yeah.
I confess, as a senior, I was okay talking to all the seniors, but there were a lot of seniors.
Well, because, a lot of people have just their mobile phones now, so, yeah. Councillor Fraser?
I actually had an idea about the list of phone numbers we used. I had actually gotten an email from a political party that said, would you like a phone call from our leader? And if so, you can go and, sign up and you can put your phone number in there. I wonder if there could be that kind of, if we're going to be reaching out and calling people, if people could register to have themselves on that list so they know it's coming. Because I know a lot of people, if they don't recognize the number, they don't pick it up. So if they knew, if they were expecting the call, that might give us a list of people that we could reach out to without having to wade through a lot of disconnected numbers.
Well, and some people also don't want to talk either, right? So there's nothing worse than being bombarded by calls that you don't want to take. So yeah, I agree.
I had somebody call me back twice.
Oh,
to tell me other things that were a concern.
Really?
Yeah.
And one.
Really?
Yeah. It's like, oh, well, I was thinking about it, and call me back. So I thought that was kind of good because it really built connection.
I had a few texts on after the fact, extra stuff to talk about.
Good. That's good. Does anybody else have anything to add to that? Councillor Auld and then Councillor Alderson. And then I think I saw Councillor Fraser's hand going a little bit, but you have to go higher so I can see it. Councillor Auld, I don't know what that is about, but Councillor Auld.
One of the, same with everybody else, everybody's pretty positive. One of the comments about shopping local, I got from a few people, whether or not we could work with the chamber and get them involved with the business. And like we do with Christmas time, the chamber bucks, that type of deal, instead of just waiting till Christmas, if we could implement a program like that sooner, like that, chamber bucks kept a lot of money in town at Christmas time. If we get them on board to get a little jump on it when this is done and over with.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I see a couple of people writing that down. Mr. Krause and Mr. Hartling. Okay.
That brought a lot of money.
Yeah.
Their numbers were
awesome. Councillor Alderson and then Councillor Phillips.
Good transition there, I like that. Yeah, mine's not much different talking to everybody else. Most people were positive. There's been a couple people affected. Obviously, they are aware that a lot of people have been, but most of the people I talked to, they didn't seem to be highly affected themselves. A couple businesses that I talked to that were, they did say yes, but it was mostly related to oil field over the last little while, not due to COVID itself. And yeah, I think that encouraging people to shop local, and there's a few people that agreed with or suggested to try to have people go online because that would just make sense. So my only thing about that is I do think that's the way people should have gone anyhow, like a hybrid between if they have a brick and mortar and online, because that is the way the world's shifting. But there has been a lot of people that have spent money over their duration in business to go online if they're not a tech savvy person. And so this is my only, I want to encourage people to go that way, but people have paid other people because that's how business works. If you want to get ahead, they've gone that route, spent the money to go do that. So I don't know about providing that necessarily for somebody, or at least I do believe in pointing them in the right direction so we can help people, giving them proper information. I don't know about necessarily setting up everybody to do that ourselves, well, because other people have taken that upon themselves to do that in the past, and that's why they're ahead.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Fraser?
That what Councillor Ald said, that was the other thing I had written down, was for the passport to Christmas, the suggestion that we do a passport to summer, and I actually think they'd be an interesting quarterly promotion, just so we could get a feel on, how much money is being spent locally and whether we're improving it, or what it would give us some good data, and it would give people some fun incentives, and they're not being punished if they don't want to participate. But I think that's something that could probably be done biannually, if not quarterly.
I think that's a great idea because some businesses cater to more, different seasons as well. So, yeah. Okay, thank you. Councilor Phillips?
Just to elaborate on Councilor Ald's chamber bucks scenario. 20-some years ago, back when I was president of the chamber, Jeff may remember this, the Christmas check program that was done through the credit union. I know that injected at least $500,000 of money directly into the community, and that money could be spent out of the community. That may be another program that could be revisited, maybe revived, and brought back.
That was kind of a loan, right?
Basically, it was an interest-free loan as long as it was paid off by sometime in April, and the checks were used in participating business in town, and they would just take those checks and credit union and get the cash for it. So it was quite successful back in the day.
Yeah, did we talk about this? Talk about this before? Like Cochrane?
I know.
And workbooks. Yeah, no, I think there are definitely lots of, and I think we do have to partner with the chamber. I think that chamber has to be brought into this for sure. Okay, any other feedback? So should we go ahead and arrange then for some sort of a virtual town hall? And so do we want information brought back then to a report brought back to the next council meeting as to how we're going to do this, how we're going to get people to register? Are we going to have on our Facebook page some sort of a portal that they can identify themselves as?
Same that we do the ones with the provincial government and that. You put your phone number in that says, okay, we'll call you right before it starts, then you get the call and you're in. Let's start free if you want to ask a question.
Oh, I would think the provincial government has a little bit more money than we want to spend.
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we can explore this and bring it back to council for next week.
Sure. Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And
Is that enough time?
provinces willing to.
Or you might.
Yeah, they might. Actually, that's the point. Okay, do we need a motion then to bring that information back? Somebody willing to make that? Councilor Fraser?
I will make that motion to bring back technological options for a virtual town hall.
Is that good enough?
Yeah, I'm just looking at it, so I'll be looking at this button to kind of put this together. So I'm lines next week is too soon to put this together.
That's why you have me to. Good answer.
May 12th.
Okay, we're just staff meeting 12. Okay. All right, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thanks everybody for all of your work on that. You all get gold stars for that homework assignment. All right.
Bun.
Oh, okay, next time. Does anybody need a break? Sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna call it's 2:54. I'll call a 5-minute break. Mayor, can leave the camera on, but mute everybody. All right. Chairs are not as comfortable as the others.
Pardon?
Please do. All right. Councillors, you are in control of your own mics, unless you want me to unmute you. All right.
It's 3:01 and I'll call the meeting back to order. We're on to number 10. 10.1, I just need a motion, please, to accept 10.1 to 10.15 as correspondence for information. Councillor Alderson, all in favor of that motion? Carried.
It's funny, I knew out of the corner of my eye that you didn't see my hand.
I'm trying. Okay, 11.1, just my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have. If not, I just need a motion to accept. Councillor Phillips?
I'll make a motion to accept the mayor's report.
All in favor of that motion? And that's carried, thank you. Any questions for any of the councillors on your individual reports? Okay, seeing none, I'll make a motion to accept all of the councillors' reports as presented. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried, thank you. Moving on to number 12, the action list. Does anybody have any questions on the action list? Seeing none, just a motion to accept the action list as presented. Councillor Alderson, all in favor? Councillor thank you. Okay, got it. Okay, moving on to number 13.1. The administrative inquiry. And we'll move that over to Laura.
Just getting myself a microphone.
And we're just going to go through the town website. And if anybody has any questions.
That's right. So I'm going to share my screen, councillors. I hope you can hear me from afar. I had this all ready to go, didn't I? Okay. Forgive me just one moment. There it is. Okay.
Okay, so I can't see the councillors now on Zoom. So if you have a question, please just speak up, okay? And make sure you're unmuted, please.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, this is our new website. It's been in place now for a number of months. January was a flurry of, ironing out all of the fine tuning it and the like. And then February, I was mostly absent and then came back to COVID. So I'm really thankful, Mayor, for your inquiry because it kind of forced me to catch up on some of those things that had been needed to be done and so got done. So our landing page, welcome page, we've got scrolling photos. COVID is very much dominating. I did provide some stats in my admin report that show that COVID is indeed dominating. That's what people are looking for when they land on our website right now. Although prior to COVID, careers, the Aquatic Center and this center, the Christensen Center, are also the top ones. So you're going to see some of these buttons across the bottom here change to reflect that because we want to put those things that people are looking for where it's easy for them to find. So if you, About Rocky is largely, these are services that residents and businesses would primarily be looking for. Rocky for visitors would be just what you see. Snowmobiling conditions are there. This is a feature perhaps Dean Schwader could speak to where this came from. It's been on our old website for a long time. A gentleman provides the stats for us.
Can you click on that? Sorry,
I sure can. Yeah, sorry, I'm. Here we go. My wireless mouse stopped working right before this meeting started, so I'm stymied by that. I will. Here we go. Just want to make sure that remote counselors, do you now see Rocky for visitors on it?
Yep.
Okay, great. That did copy over. So we're looking at snowmobile conditions and what this gentleman provides us, his map And then he provides a snow conditions report. It's going to be outdated now because of course the snow is gone, but you can click into it, open it, and see that he provides his report. I'll have to go into my downloads and get it. But it's reflective of the conditions in the West Country around here. And there's a small group, well, a fairly large group actually, that really rely on this link on our website. And so when it didn't make the easy, smooth transition to our new one, we sure heard about it, didn't we, Dean Schrader? And Jeff, that's right. So this is Rocky for Visitors. It's where you'll find things that visitors to the area would like. Planning is also there. These are all of the planning economic development pages. So this one is interesting. You may find it interesting. One of the things we talked about at our service level review, and one of the ways that we're streamlining our advertising and things. So we're no longer advertising in print our non-statutory things like development permits. So we're not required to advertise them. And so we are required to post them in a place, and that's what you see in the front hall with the bulletin board. We're actually moving that, I believe, outside for access during this COVID. But this is just a secondary place where you can find it. And so I don't actually maintain this, that's up to the planning department. And so Michael does a good job of putting it in, the description, the address, legal, and then of course you can see the full details on that.
So everything that's on that bulletin board in the town lobby, or front entrance, is on here then?
If it has an active, Dean Schrader can help me out perhaps, if it is in an active appeal stage.
Correct, an actual, so.
Yeah. So that's where people can stay up to date on what's happening. Okay. Corporate services is where you're going to see, we've got bylaws, policies, our financial statements, finance, utilities, taxes. One thing we haven't developed yet, but we can do it here, is we can actually upload all of our cemetery data and like the map, so to speak. And it's just a matter of Ray Lee and I getting together and making it happen. It's very straightforward. She's excited. Excuse me. When we talked about it in the fall, knowing that this was coming, we were eager to get it up there because we do field a number of requests. Excuse me. At the front counter, and also emails from around the world. Actually, I've had a few from overseas wondering about this person and the other. So that will be a really neat feature. I'll be sure to let council know once that's up and running. Engineering and operations, they've got their roads, quite a few policies here. We send a lot of people to the snow removal and winter road maintenance policy, so that's easily found. With the changes to our garbage collection service and the change of date, those pages were pretty busy in February, and that's dropped off. People are in the new routine. And of course, as council progresses with its environmental sustainability committee work, we'll see some updates to this one as well. One of the things I mentioned in my report is the online forums. And so that's what I'm using. You've seen them. That's what I'm using for their task force recovery ideas. The report of concern came from council earlier this year about reporting potholes, but you can use it very much to report anything. And it gets used, but every time I kind of do a reminder on social media that this is an option, they spike, right? And we'll get 3 or 4 that day, and then they'll peter out to 1 or 2 a week or something. People are still using the town at rockymountainhouse.com email to send general inquiries, but more and more are coming this way. So far, I believe the departments are liking this system. We've got some redundancy in there. They're on our website. They also come to me and to the town email address, although certain ones go directly to the right departments. If you're choosing, for example, a public works, if that's the inquiry you're making, I believe it will actually go directly to the public works department as well as me. So there's some redundancy in there where you can make sure we're not losing track of any requests, and any of the website administrators who log in from the back end can also see ensure that there's no requests outstanding. Sometimes it's, there was one that came in earlier this week that really involved both engineering and operations as well as protective services. So simply forwarding it to both of those, and they work it out from there. If there's any follow-up to the resident or business who's going in, if it's appropriate, who's making the inquiry, if it's appropriate for me to respond to them directly, I will. And sometimes it's up to directors or other some of my colleagues. A tax inquiry, for example, would go to our property tax coordinator to follow. That's just by way of an example. The forms as well, it's the same thing, very similar, but it's not a reporting or request, but this is the requesting the drive pass to join if you're having a child's birthday celebration. I was able to put this together in minutes. This is a really great feature on our site, and it's available. It's kind of, if you've ever built a SurveyMonkey survey, it's very similar. You can choose whichever fields you want. They're pre-formatted, and so it's great. So that's kind of an overview of our website. You will obviously have our social media tabs that link us up with our social media channels. Temporary road closure right now for a water line break. I posted that since we came into this year here, because when I heard from engineering and operations. Upcoming events. So this has very much been underutilized since moving to the new website. We were, FCSS and I were doing a very good job of populating it on the old site. Since moving over, I have to say it's just been a symptom of our time the last 2 months and the reality of, but this is all of my colleagues who have access to the website have access to this feature, and we will get into the habit of uploading those notices. Council meetings are there already. And also you can see add event, so people in the community can actually add.
Oh, they can?
They can add their own event. Okay. And that is something that a few people used on our former website, and we hadn't pushed much early this calendar year before things got a little COVID-y, but it's something we can indeed do, and I expect once we can start to gather and host events, we'll see that.
You'll see push this more then?
Yeah, we'll push that more.
And is there a way to marry that with David Thompson? Like put the events from that?
Oh, David Thompson.
David Thompson events?
I was thinking
in there?
The resort. Yes, David Thompson Country. We can indeed. And actually that will be something that Jeff and I work together on. Just populating it.
Yeah, just in case somebody doesn't know about the other website and then they want to go to this one.
COVID, you'll find lots of different ways to navigate to our COVID response page right now, simply because that's what people are looking for. This is where you'll find our task force information, the drive past, resources for businesses. We're still receiving quite a bit about COVID complaints. Once again, we are directing them to the province, and so we've provided that information here for them. Our main COVID page includes links, and this has been our strategy from the get-go. This is a provincial public health emergency, and they very much have jurisdiction over it. And so we are driving people to the provincial resources to get up-to-date information. What you will find here being updated is our municipal response. And from Councillor's discussion earlier that the community is pretty in tune with the municipal response and responsibilities on roles of government. That tells me that I think this is working. This is just a chart showing our facility closures and the guidelines for use, particularly our outdoor ones. So we will. So that's that. I did want to pop into council because council is, of course, all of your smiling faces. So you can meet council. I've dropped a button here for the recovery task force because that truly is an initiative of council, so that's here as well. And this is where you will connect with each of you and council's contact information, our strategic plan, our committee appointments, code of conduct bylaw, things that are directly related to council. And we also have remuneration and expenses uploaded monthly, thanks to Ledge Services for providing. And then also have one other thing I wanted to show under council. Oh, council meetings. This is where people access our recordings and our meeting agendas down at the bottom. So we've recently switched, we're in transition, switching from our previous livestream.com account where we live streamed our council meetings. That was a really costly contract and we didn't renew it this fall, this spring. So we are moving to YouTube. We've already made that transition. AllNet Meetings, which is the program that Ledge Services uses to manage meetings, can integrate very nicely with live streaming, but not on the Zoom platform. So right now we're kind of in a hiatus between we're live streaming, we're meeting all of our requirements, but it isn't as seamless for somebody to jump to this section of our video from the agenda. And that will come once we're all back in one room in council chambers. Renee and I have already been chatting with AllNet. And so we are really looking forward to doing that. That will also eliminate my time. If you recall, when I would bring a clip of each, council item in our live stream, that will all be just integrated seamlessly once we are back in meeting in one room for that. So we're looking forward to that. I just want to have a quick look at my notes to make sure there's nothing that I wanted to say that I've missed.
Laura, can I just ask
yes.
about the archived meetings?
Sure.
Like where would people find if they wanted to find out something from a meeting that happened 2 years ago?
Right down here. So in our council agenda and council minutes.
Okay.
And this is where you find them. So these are everything that is
they're going back as far as 2016?
2016 here, that's right. And that would sync up with the most recent, I believe, meeting manager software change, which was Civic Web or Plus.
Yeah.
I believe that's
okay.
That's as far back as they go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Your worship, we can go back as far as we like.
Oh, okay.
So we decided just for time to go back to, what is it? 2016, yeah. So everything's been uploaded and then we upload the new minutes. Now we can also upload minutes that you can click just up if you go up a little bit.
Yeah, sorry, where did you find that?
This is on the council meetings page.
Okay, yeah, that's where I am now.
Okay, so
Yeah,
oh, there you go.
to the bottom of the page.
Yeah, got it.
And we can upload, it's just a matter of us clicking a button to give access to the minutes. If you go up just a little bit, Laura, please.
Mm-hmm.
So that the minutes would show up here, but they're not signed minutes. And so we just thought that people would want to see the official minutes rather than really a draft minute. So.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
And just a note here. So we've been recording meetings now since November of 2018 because we are in that transition between live stream and AllNet meetings and this in between time of Zoom to YouTube. And so our previous recordings, they are being transferred over. And so right now, if somebody is looking for something in particular, they can request it. I expect that will get done in the next couple of months, all of that content to be moved over. That's something that has to be done manually, not like the transition of website content, which went real smoothly. So that was too bad. I think that was all the high level things I had. Mayor, last week you did ask me about our audited financial statements, and so they are linked in a couple of places. Pardon me.
Are they under the spot that I was looking for them?
Yeah, they are,
Okay.
because that was, I believe that went to,
Maren has something she'd like to
Oh.
say, but she can't unmute herself.
oh dear, excuse me. I'm so sorry, Councillor Fraser. Let me bring you back.
I mean, Councilor Fraser.
Oh, I didn't say.
Yay.
Release her.
Go ahead, Councillor Fraser, you had a question?
Yeah, I just, the visitor's guide in the Rocky for visitors, it doesn't go anywhere. Is that supposed, is there a visitor guide coming?
That's interesting to me because that's one of the things I did actually look at in the last week while I was putting this together. Let me see. So that would be a link to our, excuse me. That link does go to the Mountaineer who publishes the visitor's guide, and should. I'm struggling with the mouse. Forgive me. And it should go to their external website. Now, Jeff, I don't know if you have any update on the 2020 Visitors Guide. No update at this time, so it's possible that they're in transition there.
Not ready to print.
Oh, I see that. Apparently they're not planning to print a Visitors Guide this year.
Okay.
So that could be. I will look at that, Councillor Fraser, when the meeting wraps up, because that's something I'd like to see from the back end, and I don't want to do that while we're.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, but thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Councillor Auld had something as well. You can't unmute either.
Okay, I'll be right with you. I'll also unmute Councillor Alderson while I'm at it. I'd love to.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Auld.
He's not unmuted.
Oh, whoops, you're not unmuted yet. Sorry, just there. Now you are unmuted.
I didn't actually have anything to say. I just didn't like being ignored.
All right.
All right. Any other questions about the our so financial statements? Here we are, Mayor. You just asked after that. So all of our financial statements are indeed here. 2019, we haven't yet received the final copy from the auditors, but that will be uploaded as soon as they arrive.
Okay, thank you. So we've just heard that there is not going to be a visitor's guide for 2020. Do we know that for sure? Yeah.
Yes, I talked to the auditor, Your Worship, and they put up that on policy central for their notice. And as we go into the season, it didn't look too favorable at this stage.
So
I haven't talked to them for 2 weeks.
who does that? That's the Mountaineer that does the visitor guide? Okay. So no visitor guide means visitors aren't, we need to do something.
Yeah, we still have a small supply from last year, and on the visitor guide itself, it does 2019/2020. So it can still be received as a 2020 edition. But yeah, that's.
The event listings would be the only thing.
Yeah, the event list would have to be. And that's changed a lot from the initial David Thompson event list we had from 6 weeks ago.
So what can we do to make people aware of what is going to happen when it does start happening?
Through our site there's a link to the David Thompson site as well.
Okay.
And there's that's updated frequently.
So does the David Thompson tour guide, do they have a guide, like a paper copy or?
No, they use.
All that presence.
Okay, so.
Here's a link from our site to the David Thompson country website.
I mean, this year's, obviously different because it's such a unique summer, but anybody else think that we could do something different?
What
Yeah,
what
go
about the newsletter that we were that there was some discussion about that had upcoming events and updates about municipal goings on, and if that could that possibly go in that spot? I guess maybe it's less, that's less visitor-y, but it's something we were already planning to do.
Yeah, that would be a start anyways, but I'm just still curious, how was the actual print funded? Who funded that?
Advertisers.
Just advertisements. Did we put any money at all?
We paid for X amount of prints of the copy.
So-
So we bought 9,000 last year.
9,000 copies?
Yeah.
Wow.
It might have been a little more than that, I'm not sure exactly. Sorry. They've been slowly decreasing on a yearly basis, just because less and less people are paying.
So how much would we pay for a copy?
Oh, I think it's over $1.25, so 10, more in there.
So can we look at a different alternative then? At doing something that's a print copy? Maybe this year's a little bit too late, but fall, winter's, season would be late.
I'd say based on the value that we all found in the printed chamber directory, there might be some room there to combine those things, where there's a little bit more interest than just a bunch of phone numbers that don't work.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something there that can be combined.
Are we better off putting our effort into an app?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a great idea too.
So can you do an app, but then also get a few paper copies? Because there are still people that do like a paper copy. They may like a paper map that's in there, to use a paper map or local map.
We have those rip-off maps and combine that with the app. I think that's a great idea to give it a go.
So is that, I guess, no, out of this administrative inquiry comes another administrative inquiry. Jeff?
Worship, David Thomas Country Conditions developed an area map as well here this past year. It hasn't been exposed as much, there's some tweaking to be done, but it's a very attractive looking map for the region, and we can look at, we're adding a town map to that potentially. It's a very good looking map, and we're looking at getting a few of those up on Main Street as well, where there's some old billboards here that we're just touching up and put that map in there. Or directional type of piece of
I can see this being useful too, to promote the local shopping. Maybe the discounts can be printed in that print as well. Councillor Fraser?
I was wondering if we could maybe have, because I know that we had the snowmobiling conditions. Do we have a link to like the walking trail in town and other trails and like a town map? I think like a map section might be useful. And then we can also have the snowmobiling conditions or the trail conditions so visitors can check.
Mayor and Councillor Fraser, we do have town maps. The maps section is in the planning department. Just stop sharing my screen so that we can see our remote members here, but it is there. But there certainly is room to add additional prominence for those maps on our website, absolutely.
We're promoting tourism. We need something. That's my thought. Yeah, it's in our strategic plan. We need something. I wasn't aware that there was not going to be a directory this year, so yeah, Jeff?
with the David Thompson website as well, that's getting hit more and more. Like, people are going to it for tourism related travel. And the other challenge we have, we've been after businesses to get to come on board with it locally and in the region.
And that's been an ongoing challenge.
But again, we can work with the chamber on that and does anybody have any other feedback on this? Councillor Auld?
Other than that, yeah, I think it's very important too that we get something out there. We're in the state now where we're trying to attract as many people here as we can. I think it's important to have, we gotta get something.
Yeah, I totally agree. And maybe whether or not it's with, you know, working together with the David Thompson group. But I think there needs to be some sort of a print copy of something, maybe an app, all online, as many different areas as possible.
Yeah.
And get them out to the other areas such as the Crossing, David Thompson Resort, Lake Louise. We want people to come into this triangle and we still need some print stuff. Not everybody is online. Maybe somebody is not knowing what they want to do and they see the guide there and they think, oh, okay, well, we'll head this way instead. So definitely we need something. Can you give me direction then? Give us direction, Mr. Coates?
Your worship, I think we just need to take
Okay.
time.
Well, it was in budget then, right?
If we're already printing $9,000.
Yeah, so it's obvious, it's in budget, so.
I think it's gonna come down, I hate saying project that we work. We only have resources. So, you know, we're not juggling it, but,
yeah,
you know, doing a guide or a publication isn't a small feat, like, and whether we contract someone to do it for us.
Contract them out here.
yeah, we'll contract somebody,
Yeah.
but we can't not have tourism information on our area when that's our major, one of our major economic development strategies. So can we ask for that to come back?
Yes.
Sorry. But, not sorry. Okay, would you like a motion on?
Yes, please.
Okay, who would like to make a motion? Okay, I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we ask admin to bring back information on a visitor guide to the area.
Does it David Thompson Country make one? Do they have a print copy? They have a print something, don't they?
I'm sorry.
No, the David Thompson group, they have a print.
They have a map that they, and a brochure that they.
So should the motion also say maybe be to work together with the chamber and David Thompson Country? Because I think.
I think I'd come back with
Okay,
options and recommendations.
because then, you know, then it's not confusing, it's not messy, this is the area, we're in the David Thompson Country. Oh. Yes, okay. All right, is everybody clear on that motion? All in favor of that motion? Okay, it's 6 in favor, Councillor Auld has stepped away, so would that be noted, please? Thank you. That's carried. Now, thank you very much, Laura, as well, for walking us through that. You're welcome, okay. I have one more administrative inquiry, it's an easy one. What date can we anticipate the town office opening again under the new
Your worship,
restrictions being
we've
lifted?
had that discussion along then, and I think what we're using as our guideline is for when the province opens retail, they will open at the same time.
And that is some retail on the 14th, correct, sort of?
The 10th
Still?
to the 14th.
Okay, thank you. Councillor
I
Phillips?
had a quick administrative inquiry as well, just from these phone calls. The sewage lagoon, I know that we had talked once that the province was wanting to fast track some projects and the mechanical changing of our sewage lagoon mechanical system. Is that something that's still being considered or looked at, or?
Your worship, that is actually at the federal review level. So it's a joint grant, province and the federal government. It's made its way through the provincial review, and now it's with the federal government. So when we hear back,
10.1 points out to all of the shovel-ready projects that we send to the government. on our course grant information, so just if anybody asks, you can direct them to this and they can see what we have identified here. All right, does anybody have any other administrative inquiries? No? Okay. Does anybody have any notices of motion? I should back up, sorry, I need a motion to accept or the webpage as information.
No, that's fine, it's just.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay. So seeing nothing, I'm going to, call a 5-minute break so we can move back into closed session. I guess you guys have to exit now, right, on Zoom?